Hi there, I'm Dr. Corrine Hills, an equine veterinarian from New Zealand. Thank you for joining me today for the 9th video in this series, What has been left out of the Pro-Dosa Boost formulation and why? Pro-Dosa Boost is a complete, balanced, bioavailable multi-nutrient paste providing water-soluble vitamins, electrolytes, trace minerals, and unassembled amino acids required in greater doses when horses are under stress to support optimal metabolism, performance, recovery, and health.
I often talk about Pro-Dosa Boost as a complete, balanced, bioavailable multi-nutrient paste, but it's actually not quite complete. There are a few nutrients that I've chosen to leave out, but I did it for good reason, and I'll explain those to you now. First of all, I left out the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. They're really important for equine health, but because they're fat-soluble vitamins, they're stored in the body's fat tissues. Because they're stored, they don't need to be fed in greater doses at the moment horses are under additional stress, and they are generally well met by the daily ration. Vitamins A, D, E, and K bind with the trace minerals and reduce their availability, and there is a particularly negative interaction between iron and vitamin E. Because I wanted to ensure iron availability to support red blood cell production, I had to make a choice between the two groups of nutrients, and I chose to include iron and the other nutrients necessary for red blood cell production and leave out the vitamins A, D, E, and K. Also, because fat-soluble vitamins are stored in the body, if you feed too much of them, they can become toxic. I didn't want to run the risk of creating toxicities in horses that might get quite a lot of boost in a short period of time. Endurance horses, for instance, might get a syringe before they start a race and then one in between each loop in their longer races when it's hot and humid. And I did not want to put those horses at risk for toxicities. Also, on the subject of toxicity, I left out the trace mineral selenium. It's a really important nutrient, but that's one with a very narrow therapeutic range. And what that means is the dose that horses need for health is only a little bit less than the dose that produces toxicity symptoms. Again, because some horses get quite a bit of boost in a short period of time, that was a nutrient that really was a risky one to include. I left out iodine. That's just because the requirements are exactly the same whether a horse is grazing and relaxing in the back paddock or they're in intense hard work. That one then is well met by the daily ration. I left out biotin.
It's important for hoof health, and for race horses that are on a high grain diet, there's often benefit from supplementing biotin.
That's a nutrient that needs to be fed on a daily basis for an extended period of time to have an impact on the health and growth of hoof. I only developed Pro-Dosa Boost to fill the gap between good daily nutrition and the increased requirements on specific days horses are under stress, and so biotin wasn't really an appropriate ingredient to include. I also left out chromium, and it's another nutrient that I'm a big fan of. If you've watched my video on tying up, then you'll have heard of it. Chromium, though, is a nutrient that needs to be fed for a 3-week period or even more before an impact is made on muscle function. Consequently, I left chromium out. The last nutrient that I left out was cobalt. It was in my original formulation at a rate of 1 milligram per syringe because that's what NRC said horses under stress required. But I removed it from the formulation in 2016 when concern was starting to swirl about cobalt in nutrition. Before we removed it, though, we did a really interesting cobalt clearance study that I would encourage you to read. Some of the results were really fascinating. In our study, we demonstrated there was no risk posed to drug tests at the level we had it in Pro-Dosa Boost of 1 milligram of cobalt, but we also demonstrated there was no need to include it. Most of the horses were already eating in their daily ration more cobalt than NRC requirements called for, but without all of the nutrients necessary for absorption and function, some was being excreted. By providing a syringe boost that contained all of the other nutrients needed for absorption and function, the horses in the study were able to more completely utilize their daily cobalt, excreting none as waste. Other than that, then, Pro-Dosa Boost is a really complete, balanced, and bioavailable multi-nutrient paste.
For an overview of what you've already heard, and to learn more about how Pro-Dosa Boost can be helpful in your stable, please watch the last video in this series, a brief summary of Pro-Dosa Boost.